Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to give it a couple of minutes to make sure that everyone is able to join us. In the meantime, you can introduce yourselves in the chat, maybe mention where you're based. And we also have a Mentimeter today. And if you could please pin yourselves so we get a bit of an overview of where you're joining us from. All right, we're going to give it a couple of minutes. Okay, I already see a few. So we have Indonesia. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a bit later there. We have Germany, UK, Uganda, Quebec, South Africa, even someone from Australia. Okay. This is great. I'll give it a few more minutes. I see we still have some new people joining. A couple of people from South America, the Netherlands, Mauritania. All right, this is great. It's so cool to see everyone pop up on the map. Buenos Aires. Great. All right, Joanna, I think we can start the presentation then. Then for those that have just arrived, again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar on mobilizing local voices from daring cities to COP30, which is our second Reflect webinar for Daring Cities 2025. My name is Katharina Schlinger. I'm an officer at the ICLI Global Events team here in Bonn in Germany, and I will be guiding you through today's webinar. Throughout the webinar, you can use the chat function to exchange with other participants. And if you have any questions, you can also use the Q&A box. If we move on to the agenda, so as I just mentioned, this is actually our second Reflect webinar. So we use these Reflect webinars to create a connection from the previous Daring City cycle, ending with COP29 to the next one. And so our first Reflect webinar took place in March, and it included reflections from local government leaders who attended COP29 back in November in Baku. And they shared their key takeaways as well as their priority actions to the next UNFCCC, so COP30, which will be taking place in November again. And we also introduced the town hall COPs and had a special focus on climate action and governance in Brazil as the next host for the COP30 and their NDC 3.0. So we will be following up on some of these points and topics today as well, which leads me to our agenda, which you can see here. So we'll start off with a few updates on COP30, as well as CHAMP and the Town Hall COPs initiative, which will also include a recap of the first 2025 Town Hall COP initiative, which took place just a few weeks ago. We'll then move on to the SB 62, the bond talks and the bond dialogues taking place in June, and also introduce our program for then. And we're counting on interventions and messages today from Katja Dörner, who's the mayor of the city of Bonn in Germany, as well as Elizabeth Adamczyk, who's a councillor in the city of Newcastle in Australia. And we'll also have Amelia Dearman, who will talk about CHAMP, and Yunus Arikan, who's the director of global advocacy at ICLI. And so on this note, we will now first hear from Yunus, who was recently in Brazil, in Brasilia, and he will now share some updates regarding COP30. Yunus, on to you.
Thank you, Kata. Greetings to all participants and colleagues. It's really Nice to see this diversity and enthusiasm from all our colleagues. Indeed, we have almost completed the first quarter of 2025, which is in fact the time when the host country, the Brazilian government, has almost now completed all its technical and political preparations, which means there was an important meeting in Berlin a couple of weeks ago, which was the first time Brazilian presidency under Delago, which you heard from the previous webinar. There was a special message to our constituency. He was together with Anatoly, the COP30 presidency CEO, together with German government and met with around 40 ministers. That was the first time that they received feedback from their 10-page summary of their vision towards COP30, which we can say is one of the most impressive preparations in terms of the vision, the depth, and the willingness to take the agenda forward. Obviously, we are all going through difficult times, but it's so good to see a country like Brazil, which has been very familiar, well known for being passionate and pioneering in sustainability and all the other relevant agendas. This also was the opportunity in Berlin that we as constituencies were also able to interact both through plenary interventions like I delivered or the other constituencies were able to intervene during the breakout groups as well. The interesting thing from Berlin Dialogue, Petersburg Dialogue, is that for the first time in the agenda, there was a request for a dialogue among ministers, multi-level action. The word multi-level action is addressed directly into the agenda. The second uniqueness was that they were focusing at the governance of the climate convention or the overall under the climate action inside the UN space. This is unique because for years there was a discussion that we are now focusing on the Paris Agreement, but of course the mechanics are still built on the previous era of Kyoto era, uh, taking into account some countries' resistance or even blocking the UN process, offering an idea for a governance that and making the UN process fit for Paris Agreement is excellent idea. I think we have to embrace this and we have to really engage with that. So we as ICLE and LGMA will be continuing on that. The day after this meeting in Berlin, we were in Brasilia, and there was the unique opportunity that we have kicked off the national coordination group from the Brazilian partners for the LGMA constituency, which is of course a unique moment because they have interacted their national governments, and now it's time for them to really discuss about how can they feed into the Brazilian government's preparations, but also unique position of the Brazilian actors on the climate federalism. How can they formulate exact examples and share it globally? There was a really nice momentum. We had representatives from various ministries of Brazil, and our keynote speaker was Minister of Cities, Jadar Filho. It was more than 40 partners of national and global partners in Brazil. The week after, there was another progress. The high-level climate action champion of the Brazilian government is announced. He is a well-known entrepreneur from Brazil, which means the whole architecture and the machinery of the Brazilian government as COP30 presidency is now ready to take off. And considering all these preparations, we are now also starting to prepare for our agenda as LGMA, and it's very likely that we will be aiming for urban COP30 in Belém. And we will discuss what the uniqueness in the next couple of weeks, but we are very confident that this will be an important moment, and we will discuss how town hall COPs fit into this process. Kat, I think that was my input for this round.
Thank you, Yunus. Thank you for sharing these updates. And from COP30, we would now like to move on to CHAMP. And I would like to ask Emilia to join us. I believe she's here with us.
Hi, Kata.
Hi, nice to see you. And yeah, any updates and plans ahead on regarding CHAMP? On to
Yeah,
you.
of course. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to join you all on the call today. So I'm Amelia Dimon from the Global Covenant of Mayors, and I'm focused on the CHAMP initiative and the road to COP30. So quick background, CHAMP was launched at COP28 and now has 75 endorsing countries. So national governments signed up to the coalition and committed to collaborating and consulting their subnational governments in their national climate plans and sort of supporting them to deliver ambitious climate action. So we do a sort of series of things as a coalition of partners that support the CHAMP initiative. That includes sort of deep dive activity with countries. So, for example, this year, sort of launching the Green and Resilient Cities project in Brazil. And my colleagues recently worked on a workshop with the Philippines, local governments empowering their climate action for their NDC development. And they had 150 attendees on that webinar. So just two examples there as an in-depth work. And we also try and bring this conversation to the global stage. So I'll come on in a second to talk about the COP, but this year did some work around the Urban Shift Conference, ran some events on subnational climate finance and CHAMP in Nairobi in February. So I think also just to quickly say, we have seen some progress on CHAMP in terms of the NDCs. So 6 out of the 8 CHAMP endorsing countries that have submitted NDCs 3.0 are much better on subnational inclusion, and 4 of those mentioned CHAMP. So that's also been a really great success. So I think Eunice might want to come in on this, but for Bonn plans, we're looking at thinking about a CHAMP endorsers roundtable, which happened at Bonn last year, and this will be with the UNFCCC focal points happening on Tuesday, the 17th of June. So ICLEI will be leading this roundtable as a key partner of CHAMP and really looking to bring endorsing CHAMP countries together, subnational leaders, and potentially some other partners from the sort of CHAMP ecosystem. And lots of you on this call, I'm sure, will be involved. And then I think just beyond that, wanting to share that GCOM and C40 will be thinking about obviously how we can come in and support the LGMA position, which will hopefully have a section on multi-level governance, which links to CHAMP, having a sort of bilateral program, looking at how we can engage with some of the countries that have already endorsed CHAMP to fulfill their actions, but also look at potentially new recruits to the coalition, keep building on the success and the strength of the coalition of the willing that we have built. And I think we're also thinking through some additional events that we can maybe include to align and really support the official endorsers roundtable that ICLEI will be leading on. And then I guess plans for Belém will build from this point, not to jump sort of ahead to COP30, but we're looking to focus on that NDC progress, financing for subnational projects, the negotiations, of course, and the very positive stories that cities and regions can share to boost climate action. So that was a bit of a run through, but yeah, I'll hand back to you, Kata. Hope that was helpful.
It was. Thank you so much, Amelia. Great to hear. And we'll get back to the event that you just mentioned. We'll get back to that at a later point in this webinar. So thank you so much. We'll now be moving on from, so we discussed COP30, then CHAMP and multi-level action, and now move on to the next level, which are the town hall COPs, or the town hall COP initiative, connecting the climate action at all levels. We already touched upon this on the previous Reflect webinar, but Eunice, if you don't mind reintroducing it and giving some updates on that front as well, and then we'll hear from Sydney.
Thank you, Kata, and thanks, Amalia, for all the updates from GCOM and CHAMP. And I think that's really exactly fitting our initiatives. As you have heard, national governments are stepping up. Resident government is trying to make a major change in Belém, and how we can contribute to this process wherever we live. That's the whole spirit of Town Hall COPs. As Kata mentioned, we will hear some good practical experience from Sydney, but let's recap what do we mean by Town Hall COPs. If you go to the next slide, Kata, we thought we have been familiar with community level, community-based engagements, discussions, stakeholder engagements at the city councils. That's not new for us. This has been the heart of the climate action. What is the thing that is new or added into this process is threefold. So let's remember, first of all, it is primarily designed as an event that is hosted or convened or led by local regional government. and it's an enemy to connect all levels of action. In that sense, we would like the discussion to reach to the communities and that they take ownership. The community-led element is the key. The second, one of the most important points that we'd like to have, that it should be national relevant, which means, as you heard, national plans are now being designed, and it's the first time they are asked to get input from local engineers as well. So we have an opportunity and responsibility to shape this, and how these plans will help us later on, as you heard from Amalia, be it implementing our actions or getting access to the funding sources, financing opportunities. Once you're in the plans, you're much better, could be connecting to the national and global climate finance. And the third, as we heard from Dubai, Baku, the transformation element, that is climate action is beyond just mitigation. It's touching across all colors of life and all communities, and that it should be really introducing a change in our lives on a positive level, and it is shared by all, that it's a prosperous future for all. Let's go to the next slide. There was a couple of concrete explanations further. First of all, one of the things that was for a long time, climate commitments were not even being heard by national and local communities. So that's an opportunity for them to make them aware by residents, that they are aware of what their national governments and local governments are doing. Obviously, local climate action, the subnational climate action is important. We will continue to act, and then we will showcase how the national climate plans can be enriched. And of course, how our national governments are preparing for this new plan, because it will shape our next 5 or 10 years or onwards. And of course, day to day, practically, why climate action is impacting all parts of our lives. Next slide. We have listed a number of reasons why we are active this year. As we have heard, we have to bring the climate agenda back to our societies. We are experiencing serious climate emergency. We have to be prepared for new opportunity, new realities. We have new climate plans, especially CHAM countries are making good practices. We have to relate ourselves. There is every day you are hearing concerning political updates, and the more we can bring the discussion back to climate and sustainability, the better we can unite our societies. We had this experience and legacy from Talanoa Dialogue, Stocktake, so it is also not from scratch. We have an experience for that. And of course, it should be a year-round engagement, not just the event in Belém, especially for those who cannot travel. And in that sense, we are bringing COP our homes, and we are trying to shape the COP in Belém from home. And I think that part is also very, very well received by Anatoni, Andrea Del Lago. They are really looking forward to see that. It's not a couple of thousands people in Belém, but hundreds of communities are taking ownership of this climate action, and Belém demonstrates this practical momentum and mobilization. I think that was all from our side. So let's hear, I guess, how our leaders have really been inspired and embraced this, and how they put this into action. I think, Kata, we will hear some real stories.
All right. Yes, so if we could please have the video from Sydney. There's two videos actually. So we first have Councillor Elizabeth Adamczyk, who has kindly recorded a video message reflecting on the town hall COP. So it's more of a short summary, and then we have a second one. So it's followed by a more in-depth explanation by our colleague from ICLEI Oceania, Luigi Saro. But yes, first on to the councillor.
Hello, I am Dr. Elizabeth Adamczyk. I am an elected councillor for the City of Newcastle, and I am the newly elected chair of the ICLEI Oceania Regional Executive Committee. I would like to acknowledge the unceded country of the Awabakal and Worimi people, where I record this message from. I pay respects to their elders past and present, and to their invitation to share in a more responsible future, stewarding our beautiful environment. Last month, on March 13th, I participated in the Greater Sydney Regional Town Hall COP, which was co-hosted by ICLEI Oceania and supported by the Global Covenant of Mayors. This COP was the first in the build-up to COP30. 16 local councils in Greater Sydney were represented by elected leaders and community, along with observers from peak organisations and government. The discussions followed a Talanoa dialogue format, and a number of key opportunities emerged. Australia's current nationally determined contributions set a net zero target. However, its domestic pathways fall short of modelling an all-of-economy approach. While Australia is a significant fossil fuel exporter, local governments have long been committed to net zero and reducing emissions with our communities. According to a 2024 review, local governments are capable of reducing emissions by 15% by 2035. Our Town Hall COP committed to this ambition, to strengthening the national targets, pursuing energy transitions that place not only resilience at the centre, but supporting just transitions as our households electrify, where every person can participate in the outcomes, putting that at the heart of community needs. This is about climate and cost of living and equity. Our discussions addressed fossil fuel reliance and reached consensus that nuclear energy is an ineffective and distracting short-term option. Renewable energy is vital, with an urgent need for just transition strategies for coal and gas-dependent communities like ours here in the Hunter. We also desire stronger collaboration across levels and areas of government as vital for Australia realising ambitious NDC targets and to ensuring inclusion and diversity in climate initiatives for policy making for a safe and inclusive future. Misinformation about renewables that undermines trust in climate initiatives and polarises our communities needs to be countered. And revised environmental laws need to protect nature whilst facilitating renewable infrastructure. Town hall COPs like ours present this ideal opportunity to mobilise locally, bringing together diverse stakeholders to influence national, regional and global outcomes for inclusive, bold climate action.
Great. So once again, that was Councillor Elizabeth Adamczyk. Thank you so much for sharing your reflections. And now Luigi Zaro, who's our colleague from ICLEI Oceania, will provide a bit longer, more in-depth analysis or explanation of how the Town Hall COP went. And as the council just mentioned, topics such as misinformation, renewables, but especially just transition and inclusion were the big ones. So let's hear from Luigi.
Hello colleagues, my name is Luigi Zaro from ICLEI Oceania, and it's a pleasure to be here to address a bit about our Town Hall COP process that happened recently in Sydney, and also to address the Stirring Cities Forum. The Town Hall COP in Sydney happened in March, and it was a fabulous opportunity. We were pleased to support 16 local councils in a process, and being a greater Sydney regional COP, it really was a wonderful opportunity to really take stock of some of the key messages that are coming through the whole climate process in Australia. And we were very fortunate to really test some of what's happening in all things NDCs as well. And we were also very pleased to be able to have on the day the participation of the federal government. So this gave us a great opportunity to really look at how we progress the road to Belém, and also how to undertake some of the work around really unpacking some of the key messages that need to be addressed for cities and regions in the COP process. So in order to deliver our Town Hall COP for Greater Sydney, we followed a Talanoa dialogue, which was a wonderful opportunity to allow for open and honest feedback. And some of that open and honest feedback we received really was about some of the shortfalls involving Australia's NDCs. On that especially, there was concerns or feedback around it not really being a true whole of economy approach, but also there were issues raised around the correlation between having potentially ambitious NDCs, but actually on the ground still not committing to deep cuts to fossil fuel licenses, and also having there was quite a bit of conjecture around both sides of the Australian political spectrum not having stronger targets too. To this end, it was seen that local government really can do so much more, and in fact are the unsung heroes In fact, there was, I'm just going to read a quote here, there was an issue around potentially, from the Australian Local Government Review, that councils have the capacity to directly reduce emissions by 15%. And this also came through our review of climate action plans within the Greater Sydney region. And there was lots of open and honesty about what more can be done. And one of the things that Greater Sydney councils have committed to doing is really thinking about how they can push the agenda on some of the day-to-day issues around climate change that are impacting them. There was issues around the difficulty to encourage the reduction of gas and getting onto electrical appliances, and how planning schemes aren't yet catered to allow for more stringent requirements around the building code as well. There was also quite a bit of attention from the participants at our Town Hall COP about the forthcoming elections in Australia, which will be happening in early May. What was especially catching the attention of our participants was as I was mentioning, some of the lack of attention to deep cuts to fossil fuel, as well as some of the work that is coming, or some of the policy ideas that are coming out of the centre right, with a bit of a renewal or an alleged revitalisation of nuclear in Australia, which is definitely not something that is resonating with our local governments across the Greater Sydney area. In fact, many of the councils went so far as to say that the idea of even talking about nuclear really is detracting from the wonderful opportunities that are present in Australia when it comes to renewable energy. And there's a lot more desire by councils from Sydney to look at how they can do more renewables, but also they would like to see more work done, especially because a number of the cities in Sydney are coastal cities. I'd also love to see a lot more thought and opportunities go into water use and both water sustainable urban design, but as well as coastal management as well. And so much of Sydney is really impacted by significant rainfall, and that has been exacerbated by climate change. And so we're seeing a lot more being called for from Sydney councils for water protection and water management. Another key theme that came through on the day was one that I'm particularly interested in, which is around the misinformation and disinformation. And quite a number of the councils on the day reported that they are seeing significant incidents of misinformation and disinformation across their LGAs, and that they would really welcome concerted effort, sharing best practice, as well as stronger guidelines too from other parts of government, but even from the community too, around misinformation, disinformation, and they were especially concerned about how some of that misinformation, disinformation is often from vested interests. There's examples of some quite disconcerting viewpoints around renewables that have started to filter into some of the local government areas, and for a city like Sydney, which has so many great opportunities from across a whole range of different renewables, there was quite a bit of concern about ensuring that some of the great voices, like those of the Clean Energy Council, rise to the fore and not quashed by some of these vested interests. We're also happy to report that there was quite a number of councils reporting back on the importance of inclusion and diversity in their communities, and that really resonates strongly, especially with ICLEI's commitment to equitable development and just transition. There was a commitment to inclusion and diversity as being fundamental to Australia's role as a climate leader, and there was also a requirement for or desire for accountability in meeting NDCs as being something that should be seen through a just transition, equitable lens. And there was also commitment to, across the political landscape, to ensuring that inclusion is really deeply undertaken through all areas of community. Even those councils from Sydney who are, at first quite affluent, were quite committed to diversity inclusion. And I think that's a really important angle that should be further, they said there was an important angle that should be further built into some of the NDCs being presented in the next iteration by the Australian government. So to summarise, probably the key point I can make is that the message from the 16 councils that participated in our Town Hall COP for Greater Sydney really want to see genuine, collaborative, deep action across all levels of government. They want to see that there are the issues we raised are dealt with in a collegial manner. They want to see a commitment by Australian government to those, a commitment that transcends political spectrums, and they really want to see Australia be bolder and braver on its NDCs and on its climate goals, and really be in a position where it generally can reinvigorate the pathway to multi-level collaboration, and also really be a true climate leader, not just for Australia and for our own country, but also for the Pacific as well. As we roll out more of these town hall COPs, know that ICLEI Oceania is here to help you make that magic happen. We can help you along the whole journey of really running a super strong town hall COP, and we'd love to hear from you to help you become climate leaders, just like many of our great members here in ICLEI Oceania. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you so much to Luigi and the colleagues at ICLEI Oceania, especially on his last points. I think that a lot of them we're also interested in hearing or in seeing those happen, especially the collaborative action across all levels of governments. So maybe to use this as a moment to reflect, also from what we've just heard from Sydney, both from the councillor and Luigi, we would now be interested to hear from you, from the audience, what community-led. Yeah.
Kata, maybe we can show the last slide about
we can also do. Sure.
And then it could be helpful for them to respond.
To then move on.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds fine.
The
then
momentum could be easier.
Yeah.
Because it's just one slide that we just wrap up in terms of how this now we are exactly planning to roll out. Well, by the way, congratulations both to Councillor Adamczyk and then our colleague Luigi. This shows the local leadership. There should be a leader in the political level to embrace the charge there. There is a great opportunity if you have a staff and expertise like ICLEI in your nearby. I think you have heard the federal government was there. There was a diversity of councils. The topics really, the good thing is that Australia is an endorser of CHAMP. They haven't yet submitted an NDC, and this discussion definitely feeds into that. There were representatives from Australia in Berlin. They were really very proud and excited of this. And let's remember, Australia is also one of those countries who are expected to bid for COP31. So these kind of things that there will be multiple let's say spillover effects, and that's the reason why we're encouraging this. There may be so many countries like Australia who could have such unique opportunities. Let's think about how we want to process. We recommend you to select a date for yourself, which sometime between April and September. We really recommend you to develop the agenda with your national government, with your communities. You have heard there are some unique issues for Australia, which may be different in your country, in your city. So you have to really customize yourself. We will be releasing our toolkit in the next couple of days, and you will hear this at the end. So you can use of this information source there. Try to make sure before you prepare your community, your local government staff is well ready for such a challenge. And of course, you share your outcome with us so that we can disperse both to your national governments, we can work together, but as well as towards Belém. And that's one of the reasons we don't know who will be able to go to Belém from Sydney, but definitely the voices of Councillor Adamczyk and so many others, we will make sure in the Cities and Regions Hub at COP30, there will be opportunities where people can share what has happened in other countries, in other cities in Australia, through this kind of seeing how we have been engaged in the process. So these are the practicalities. And now I think, Kata, you have now your turn to take the ball to the court, to the other side of the screen, to our audience.
Sounds good. Thank you, Yunus. So yes, as Yunus just once again explained, town hall COPs complement the efforts by bridging the kind of the community level strategies to the national and the international agenda setting. So if we go back to the community level, and maybe Jonna, you can share the screen with the Mentimeter. What, to our audience now, as a point of reflection, what do you think community-led means? So we now heard some practical experiences from Sydney, from the Town Hall COP, but when you hear community lead what comes to your mind? We're curious to see what you think. We'll give it a couple of moments. Power sharing. So I assume amongst all community members, feel free to elaborate in the chat if you want to. Inclusive strategies, policies, actions. It's something that the councillor also mentioned, in order to have the just transition. People driven, of course. Very nice. Do you have any more? Needs and expertise of people, exactly. So by the people, for the people, self-sufficient, being heard. Yeah, so all of these definitely go all in the same direction. We have also in the chat informed and evidence-based, correct. So also, well, correct, not that there's any incorrect options here, but exactly also what Luigi mentioned in his reflections. Communities' voices are heard and taken into consideration, not just at a local level, but then ideally also national and international level. Project and organization is community-led. Yes. All involved, also students, teachers, researchers, and others. Okay, yes, well, actually also a good point that we will touch up on in our next section. So I think it's now the moment to move on to our final part of the webinar. It's definitely not less important than the others. John, I'm just waiting for the screen again. In one moment. So indeed, the Bonn Dialogue. Some of you might already be familiar with the Bonn Dialogues, but those who aren't, the Bonn Dialogues are an in-person event held alongside the SBs, the climate talks in Bonn in Germany in June, and normally invite local, subnational, and national governments, as well as representatives from businesses, so private sector, as well as academia and civil society, to really discuss how to leverage successful and multi-level action. And so to kick things off, we would like to share the welcome video message from our host, Mayor Katja Dörner, from City of Bonn, Germany.
Welcome to Daring Cities 2025 and to the second webinar of Cornerstone 1, Reflect, on behalf of ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability and the City of Bonn. We are thrilled to have you with us for this 6th edition. In 2025, tracks themed Stronger National Climate Plans Through Multi-Level Action shall empower local and regional governments to influence global climate negotiations. Daring Cities continues bringing together local and regional leaders with national policymakers to shape stronger climate plans ahead of COP30, uniting higher ambition with successful collaborative implementation throughout all levels of government after COP30. Back to the half-term negotiations of the UNFCCC between COPs, the Daring Cities Bonn Dialogues on 16 to 18 June will be our last pit stop. We shall compile our best practices, our actions and our knowledge, and we shall evaluate how we can still do better in the coming months until COP30. Secondly, ambition is of the essence. Last year, I issued you a call to action inviting mayors and local leaders to mobilize their national associations and push their governments to integrate multi-level NDCs, report them to the UNFCCC and share progress with us at the annual Daring Cities Bonn Dialogues. During the climate talks and Daring Cities Bonn Dialogues, the CHAMP UNFCCC Focal Points Dialogue will be a pivotal moment. In support, I invite local leaders and communities to bring the global climate movement home by organizing ICLEI Town Hall COPs as local climate summits. Thirdly, we already envisage the road beyond BLM. While Daring Cities will also bring in the upcoming IPCC special report on climate change in cities, the potential for new partnerships with science should be explored further, as should the connection and synergies between the conventions on land, climate and nature. Holistic action requires new partnerships, and Daring Cities dare look beyond city borders. Daring Cities is about vision, ambition, and action. And while our common challenge is financing our action in difficult political framework conditions, we are set to overcome financial, political, and structural barriers. In times of rapid global change, Daring Cities is so much more than an event. We are a global community that dares to take on bold climate emergency action. Are you ready to dare with us? Thank you all for joining us this June in Bonn and beyond.
Thank you to the mayor, and indeed, are you ready to dare with us? So how will this actually look in practice? We have a full agenda for 3 days, which we will guide you through now. So here's what will happen. On the first day, we will have the annual review of local action on Rio Convention. So this, of course, includes the Convention on Biological Diversity, the UNFCCC, and the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. And this will be followed by the LGMA SB62 briefing, and the day will end with the UNFCCC reception. Then on day 2, we will have the event that Amelia actually already mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, the second UNFCCC Focal Point Dialogue, as well as the UNFCCC High Level Champions Dialogue. And both these will be followed by an event organized by UN Habitat, ICLEI, and the Southern Denmark University as a Bonn Talks side event. And we'll, of course, also have our Daring Cities reception. And finally, on the last day, this will be an entire day at the GIZ premises. We'll kick off with a panel on multi-level partnerships during challenging times, which will have local and regional leaders. And this will be followed by a country deep dive discussion focused on the NDCs 3.0. A second panel will then discuss how we can partner on effective implementation. And after a well-deserved lunch break for participants, we'll be able to interact with each other in roundtable discussions, which will focus on 4 different topics, which are number 1, feeding local grey literature into the IPCC Special Report on Climate Change in Cities. The second table will discuss data-driven decision-making, followed by table 3, accelerating energy efficiency. And our 4th table will discuss financing nature-based solutions for climate resilience adaptations. So you can really see a full program. And yeah, as mentioned, we'll have local and regional government leaders, but also CHAMP representatives, tech level government workers, researchers, and representatives from the civil society sector, private sector, other organizations, and city networks. Yeah, Eunice, if you want to jump in here on our agenda, feel free.
Thanks, Kata. I think both Mayor and your presentation were really nicely complementing each other. I think there will be a couple of more updates, but in case there's a question coming from the audience, we can respond. I think the information that is provided already covers a lot. Yeah, as I said, if there's a need for Q&A, we can come back.
Okay, yeah, let's see at the end. For now, we would like to know from our audience which type of organization you would like to hear from at the Bonn Dialogues. Again, in the Mentimeter, you can choose now or let us know. So we have the national governments, local governments, private sector, and researchers. Of course, ideally, they will all be there, but we want to know from you which ones you want to hear from. Steve? National governments. Or again, feel free to expound on your answer in the chat. Why rather national governments than local governments or researchers? No private sector for now, but well, it doesn't mean that they're not important. People would just rather hear from from the national governments and local governments, which is also what Daring Cities is about. All right, great. Thank you so much. Then of course, yes, if you would like to join us on the 18th of June, you are able to register now. Please do keep in mind that there is only limited space on the 18th. And yeah, we'll be reviewing and confirming registrations on an ongoing basis. We'll also have a live stream available, but these are details that will follow in the next few weeks. So do also make sure to subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on our LinkedIn, and of course we'll post any updates on our Daring Cities website. Okay, Eunice, I don't know if you want to do the Q&A now, or maybe we first present the next steps. So as I just mentioned, the registration is now open. Then Eunice also mentioned earlier that we will have the registration launch for the town hall COPs on the 22nd of April. So this is just after Easter, and we'll also have the toolkit available. And yeah, in either case, you can always email us with questions, both at the Daring Cities email address, but also the Town Hall COP email address that my colleague Joanna just shared earlier in the chat. Okay. Yeah, Eunice, if you would like to add anything, now's the moment.
Thanks, Kata. I was while listening to you or watching the slide. I was also tracking the feedbacks from our colleagues in the chat box. A couple of things. One of the tens of questions came from the youth engagement. Indeed, you may be aware over the past couple of years, especially it was a legacy from Dubai, there's a youth climate champion to be announced by every presidency, and the Brazilian government even asked for like a call for proposals, and now they will announce their youth champion as well. From our side at local level, especially in Brazil, we're also very, very proud and excited. I remember a couple of cities like Recife and even Belém, the host city of COP30. They are one of the youngest leaders of their local level over the past couple of years. So there's a strong vision for youth councils to be engaged in these processes. We, together with our colleagues with Hugo, we are also working on how we can engage the youth councils to the local government climate policy making. In that sense, the town hall COPs on the way to Dubai, we also have tried to connect, for example, the conference of the youth and other processes. So therefore, I think these opportunities can help us to demonstrate how we can concretely bring local youth to the local policy making and take it to the national level. That's one of the most important powers of the local communities, that local governments, that they can really bring those people who were not being heard in the UNFCCC space. Other than that, I think there was this question of there was one thing on the business side, especially on the roundtables. We would like to announce our partnership with our colleagues from We Don't Have Time and Energy Efficiency Movement. We definitely believe, especially when national governments, let's remember, especially from the global south, we are very concerned that the committed climate finance from the global north to the global south is decreasing. There is really serious cuts. When there is international weakening of the international financing community, I think wherever you are, local business entrepreneurs could be considered as their partners, and the multinational companies could also be making this very clear to their SMEs and other partners. So we will discuss when we were coming back into the debate on the as well. So in that regard, I think we could still think that climate action is not just a national government or just a Minister of Environment business. It is all of society and all of government, and Daring Cities and panel clubs are the places to demonstrate that this is practically possible.
Thank you, Eunice. And I think this is the perfect moment to wrap up. So thank you also to Amelia, thank you for joining us, and to our to Mayor Katja Döner and the Councillor Adamczyk and Luigi for sharing the video messages. And thank you, of course, to our audience and our colleagues behind the scenes as well. Thank you for joining us today. And yeah, we hope to see you in our future events in person, virtually, in our newsletters, on our channels. And that's all from our side. Have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you so much.